What's up, guys? Today I want to take a few minutes to run down the Chicago Bears 53-man roster and give my full projection for who will make the team this season. Projecting our roster is something I mess around with year round, and I've ran multiple projections over the last month or so, and my biggest takeaway from all of this is that Ryan Poles was not joking. It is going to be tough to make this roster this season, and the front office is going to have to make some painful decisions next month. There will be good players cut from this roster. We have more than 53 guys that should be rostered, and not all of them are going to make the cut. So today I'm going to go position by position and break it down. Let's go ahead and get right into it. At quarterback, I have two guys making the roster: Caleb Williams and Tyson Bagent. The Bears altered the course of this franchise history when they took Caleb Williams with the #1 overall pick, and he's already entrenched as a starting QB. No reason to talk anymore about that. Enough said on Caleb. And then I believe Tyson Bagent is a perfect backup quarterback, a guy who is capable of operating this offense and keeping the team in games if the starter were to go down. He's also on a rookie deal, and to me, he's a lock to be our backup quarterback. And then it just comes down to Brett Rippon and Austin Reed, the undrafted quarterback from Western Kentucky. Initially, I played around with the idea of keeping Reed on the 53, but I think the Bears will probably try to stash a third quarterback on the practice squad, and I hope they do that with Reed. The NFL's rule change last year makes it easier to keep a third QB down on the practice squad while still being able to have him eligible for game days in an emergency. Moving on to running back, though, I currently have four making the roster: DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, Khalil Herbert, and Kari Blasingame. Our running back room is loaded again, with another three-headed monster that is more talented than what we had last year. Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson both return, but Deontay Foreman is replaced by DeAndre Swift, really upgrading our speed and pass catching ability at the position. Swift is the unquestioned lead back, but the battle for running back 2 is wide open. Khalil Herbert probably deserves the edge due to his previous work, but Roschon's pass blocking skills and physical running style make him a perfect complement to Swift, in my opinion. To me, Swift and Roschon form a deadly 1-2 punch, and then Khalil Herbert is a guy who provides depth, but could also factor in as a change of pace back or even as a kick returner. I'm still a big fan of Herbert, and I think he's good enough to start in the NFL, but he may fall out of the rotation here simply due to Swift and Roschon's skills. This leads people to wonder if Herbert is going to be traded, and I think it's definitely possible, but what are you going to get back in that scenario? I'm not giving away Khalil Herbert for a 6th-round pick. I would rather keep him for 1 year, and then if something happens to DeAndre Swift, Herbert is capable of filling in as a starter. So I would have a hard time trading Khalil for a late round pick. This is the last year of his contract, so even though he most likely will be leaving in the offseason, his value as a backup option is higher than his trade value to me, unless a team wants to pay up. And then we could have another battle for the 4th running back spot. There's a chance that Ian Wheeler or Travis Homer could both make this team. They're both special teamers with potential as backups. Wheeler brings more speed to the table, and he's a big play threat and solid kick returner. I want to see Wheeler in this new kick return format. I think he's going to get some opportunities in preseason. He has a chance to make this roster, but currently I have us going with only 4 running backs total and Kari Blasingame making the roster, but that could change. This final running back spot is one of the ones I'm most uncertain about when it comes to the 53-man projections. Travis Homer's a really good special teams guy, and Ian Wheeler could be an awesome kick returner, and then it kind of comes down to whether or not Shane Waldron wants to keep Kari Blasingame around. We'll find out soon. Moving on to wide receiver, though, I have 6 guys total making the roster: DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Tyler Scott, Velus Jones Jr., and DeAndre Carter. Our receiver room is loaded as well, and it's extremely top-heavy. We have potentially the best trio of wide receivers in the entire NFL, with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. After that, though, we have some question marks. Tyler Scott easily has the most upside of the rest of the bunch, and he stood out early in camp. Scott is a lock to make this roster and probably our wide receiver 4. But then I believe the last 2 spots are going to have to be guys who can contribute on special teams. I feel like it's a 3-way battle for these last 2 spots between Velus Jones Jr., Dante Pettis, and DeAndre Carter. I have us going with Velus Jones Jr. and DeAndre Carter, but I won't rule out Dante Pettis' chances of making this team. The decision was tough for me. I think Velas's home run speed and his ability as a kick returner could actually be an X factor this year, so I think Velas is pretty safe unless he has a horrible preseason. But then we have Dante Pettis, who's probably our fourth or fifth best receiver, but injuries and drops have plagued him throughout his entire NFL career. I liked the signing 2 years ago, but I think it's about time to move on from Pettis. He does have some skills though. And then unless he has some problems in camp, I project DeAndre Carter to beat out Dante Pettis for that last spot. Both of those guys can return punts, and Carter has also had some success as a receiver in the NFL with Chris Beatty and Justin Herbert. If I had to guess, I'm going to project that DeAndre Carter beats out Pettis. We do have other guys on the roster like Freddie Swain, Peter LeBlanc, and Colin Johnson. Those guys would need to have huge camps to make the team. Their best bet right now is probably to latch onto the practice squad. And then tight end is another position that is pretty much set in stone. We have Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, and Mercedes Lewis. Cole Kmet's already developing into one of the better young tight ends in football. Anyone who remembers my age 25 breakout theory with the position and the videos I did on Kmet over the last 2 years knows how high I am on him. The addition of Gerald Everett gives us two legit starting caliber tight ends on this roster. And then having Mercedes Lewis with his 19 years of NFL experience to be our third tight end completely solidifies this unit. That's bad news for Steven Carlson, Tommy Sweeney, and Brendan Bates. Unless there's some kind of injury, none of those guys really have a shot at making this team. I would love to stash Brendan Bates on the practice squad though for a year and then give him a better chance next year. But moving on to the offensive line now, where typically the team keeps around 9 players total. 7 of these spots are already complete locks to make the roster. Our starters, Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Nate Davis, Darnell Wright, and then both centers, Coleman Shelton and Ryan Bates. That's 6 guys that are complete locks. And then rookie third-round pick, Karana Megaji. Those guys are all locks to make this roster, if you ask me. That leaves only 2 spots up for grabs, and one of them is going to be our swing tackle spot. That's where one of the biggest backup battles comes into play. It's Larry Borom versus Matt Pryor. I've been back and forth on Borom. I think he's still our swing tackle as we sit here today, and I do think he has potential to play a lot better than he did last season. But then we have free agent addition Matt Pryor, who I think has a chance to beat him out in preseason. Ideally, I'd also love Jatiri Carter to win one of these last 2 spots, but from what I can tell, he's not only in the doghouse, but he's behind even Bill Murray at the guard position. But right now, I still believe there's probably 4 or 5 guys battling for these last 2 spots. Those guys are Matt Pryor, Larry Borom, Jake Curran, Jatiri Carter, and I'll throw Bill Murray in there as well as a wild card. Most people think you're going to pick 1 tackle and 1 guard here, meaning either Larry Borom or Matt Pryor, and then either Jake Curran, Jatiri Carter, or Bill Murray. Nobody's talked much about Jake Curran, but I'd rather have Jatiri Carter. So there is a good chance we could keep Carter, and then Bill Murray's a complete wild card. There's a chance that Murray or Jatiri Carter can make this roster, but when I made my projections here, I went with Larry Borom staying on the roster, and then Matt Pryor also making the roster as well. Even if he doesn't beat out Larry Borom for the swing tackle job, he still has the versatility where he can play tackle or guard. So I see Matt Pryor sticking around. So if Matt Pryor's on the roster, it really comes down to whether or not you're keeping Larry Borom. He's going to be the guy to watch throughout camp. If Borom gets cut, that increases the likelihood that Jatiri Carter or even Bill Murray can make this team. Another potential here, though, is if our rookie third-round tackle from Yale gets moved to the IR before the season starts. If that happens, it would open up another spot here and give Poles more room to be creative on the O-line. But for the record, I do not want that to happen. But let's move over to the defense where we stay in the trenches and start on the defensive line, where I also have 9 guys making the roster. Montez Sweat, Gervon Dexter, Andrew Billings, DeMarcus Walker, Zach Pickens, and then you round it out with Jacob Martin, Austin Booker, Dominique Robinson, and Keith Randolph Jr. This is where we probably have the most competition on the team for these last couple of spots. Just like the offensive line, I believe 7 of these 9 spots are locked down. Sweat, Dexter, Billings, D-Walk, Pickens, Jacob Martin, and Austin Booker. Those are the 7 locks. Those guys are on the 53 no matter what. That leaves 2 spots up for grabs between at least 8 players. You got Jamry Cromah, Dominique Robinson, Khalid Kareem, Daniel Hardy, Byron Cowart, Deshaun Mallory, Keith Randolph Jr., and Michael Dwumfor. So when you look at our locks, we have 4 edge rushers and 3 interior defensive tackles. But DeMarcus Walker does offer the versatility to slide inside as well. So most likely for those last 2 spots are going to be 1 edge and 1 interior guy. Dominique Robinson is a guy who's in a make or break season. Unlike Velus Jones Jr., though, D-Rob hasn't had much success at all in the NFL. I've went back and forth on him making the team, but personally, I kind of want to see what Jamry Cromah can do. I think he has more potential than D-Rob and could make an impact early on. But currently, I have D-Rob making the roster. But if he doesn't show development early in camp and preseason, one of these other guys is going to have a shot to beat him out. I think D-Rob probably makes the team for 1 more year. And then I might be a bit of a homer on this one, but I really like Keith Randolph Jr.'s chances of making this team. I watched him play and talked to him at the Senior Bowl this year. He definitely still needs some development, but I like his upside as a nose tackle who has some potential as a power rusher. He's going to be battling Byron Cowart for that final spot. I'm rooting for Keith Randolph Jr. But then we get to the linebackers, where I have 5 guys making it: Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, Jack Sanborn, Noah Sewell, and Aben Ogbongbemiga. But then I do think we could keep a 6th linebacker, which is why I only went with 4 running backs. This is pretty much my final spot on the team. It's going to come down to either keeping 1 more linebacker or 1 more running back. And for this video, I'm leaning towards linebacker here. I don't know which linebacker is going to take this final spot, but I think instead of keeping an extra running back, we may choose to go with a linebacker here. I think having another linebacker would be more beneficial when it comes to those new kick return rules on special teams. But this room is also pretty set except for that last wild card spot. I think free agent addition Amen Ogbongbemiga, he's pretty safe as he's a special teams ace, and they could decide to ride with just those 5 guys, but I think there's going to be a battle here. We have Micah Baskerville, Javin White, Paul Moala, and Carl Jones Jr. Honestly, I have no idea who wins this job. It probably comes down to how they perform on special teams. Although I did really like what I saw from Baskerville last season, it's really going to come down to special teams. Travis Homer or a linebacker, who is better for our special teams unit? That's up to Richard Hightower. But then let's get to the cornerback room, where I have 6 guys making the roster: Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, Tyreek Stevenson, Terrell Smith, Josh Blackwell, and Jalen Jones. Our cornerback room is led by stud Jalen Johnson and youngsters Kyler Gordon and Tyreek Stevenson. Terrell Smith is also a lock to make the team, leaving 2 spots most likely up for grabs. I have Josh Blackwell and Jalen Jones getting those spots because they've been valuable special teams contributors over the last 2 years, and I think currently they are the favorites. But the sleeper I have that I think could steal one of these spots is Greg Stroman Jr. He played well last year filling in for Kyler Gordon, and he has spent some time with the first team early in camp. I think right now Stroman has a great chance to stick around as long as he can stay healthy. But anyone behind those guys are going to have an uphill battle to make this roster. Youngsters Reddy Stewart and Leon Jones both offer some intriguing upside, but the last 2 spots at cornerback are really going to come down to your contributions on special teams. Could the Bears keep 1 extra corner? Yes, I do think they can. It really comes down to the defensive backs total. I think they're going to keep 11 defensive backs. So they could go with 7 corners and just 4 safeties if you want to keep Greg Stroman around and both of those special teams guys. Or they could keep 5 safeties this year and stick with the 6 corners. Our safety room is pretty stacked as well. We have Kevin Byard, Jonathan Brisker. We have Kevin Byard, Jaquan Brisker, Jonathan Owens, and Elijah Hicks. Those 4 are locks to make the roster, in my opinion. And then I think we have a battle for the 5th safety spot, and that should be a fierce one. I have Quindell Johnson as the guy who wins the job. He flashed his upside last year, and he's young enough to still develop. But we also have Tavarius Moore, Adrian Colbert, and AJ Thomas still on the roster. It's completely up in the air who wins that battle, to be honest. But that final defensive back job may come down to Quindell Johnson and Greg Stroman Jr. Do you keep the extra safety or do you keep the extra corner? But then we get to special teamers, and that's pretty much a lock. We have Cairo Santos at kicker, Torrey Taylor at punter, and our long tenured long snapper, Patrick Scales. That would give us 24 players on offense, 26 players on defense, 3 special teamers, making 53 total. That is my early training camp prediction for the 53-man roster. In this iteration, the top cuts, the guys who are on the roster bubble and just missed out, are going to be Dante Pettis, Jatiri Carter, Jamri Chroma, Travis Homer, Reddy Stewart, Byron Cowart, and Austin Reed. Those are guys I like who I would hope would get moved to the practice squad. But this is assuming everyone stays healthy. An important note here, and we all know this happens, is that when you add a guy to the injured reserve, it does open up a spot for another one of these guys to make the team. And it's going to be hard to make this team this season. My belief in Ryan Poles has never been higher. Yes, these guys will have to prove it on the football field, but Ryan Poles doesn't play the games. His job so far has been magnificent. Let's take a brief look at the roster he had when he got here compared to the roster he has now. And it's just insane what a difference he's made in just a couple of years. And honestly, how hard it is going to be to make this roster. Ryan Poles has changed things. But just looking at how much talent Poles has brought in, it's pretty insane, guys. Only 3 starters remain from before Ryan Poles took over this team: Cole Kmet, Jalen Johnson, and Tevin Jenkins. Football season is back, and it's a great time to be a Bears fan. So go ahead and tell me what you guys think, not only of Ryan Poles' job, but whether or not you liked my 53-man roster projection. Maybe we'll revisit it after camp ends. Is there someone I left off that you think will make the roster? Let me know below. I appreciate everyone who watches. Please remember to hit that like button for me, guys. Stay tuned, and until next time, bear down.